It's a miracle so many people are here. It's a miracle so many people.
Yeah. Då är vi framme vid sista punkten, eller i och för sig vi har även vesper och middag senare, men här panelsamtalet. Jag nämnde ju alla inledningen vilka som var här, men ni har hört 3 av dem redan, men nu har vi även fader Jakob Troné, kyrkoherde i Sigtuna, och fader Ed and fader Paul. So welcome to you, and jag ger mikrofonen till dig, Jakob.
Thank you, even though I don't have to use it myself.
No, you can send it possible.
Thank you for inspiring. Hörs det bättre nu? Good afternoon. Thank you for a fascinating day with 3 very interesting lectures from different perspectives on Christian unity and about non-ecumenism. I think we have a little more than an hour to talk to one another. I mean, I have some questions for you, and we might, in the panel, ask one another questions, and after some time, if we, by any chance, should be silent, it will be open for the public to ask a question or so. I thought I think we all in the panel should give a very short presentation of ourselves, who we are and what we do most weekdays, and somehow how Christian unity has become important to us. And in order to instruct how short that could be, I will start with introducing myself. And as you have realized, this discussion will be in English. It seems the easiest way of doing things. I am Jakob Troné. I'm the vicar of Sigtuna. I have a doctorate in ecumenical theology. Already in my youth, it became clear to me that the Church of Christ is a bigger entity than the Church of Sweden. And this I have learned, both being born almost and grown up within the Catholic tradition of the Church of Sweden, but also having friends from other Christian churches since my teens. And I could remember not least my visits to Tessé as a teenager, where I understand both that I'm a European, but also that I'm a part of a worldwide Christianity. This short can an introduction be. So shall we start to introduce those who have not been a part of the public presentations yet?
Well, good afternoon. My name's Ed Martin, and I'm a parish priest in the Diocese of Lincoln in the south. And I'm very much a contextual practitioner and thinker. So I have 8 parishes and a retreat house. So I have 7 rural parishes, 1 town centre parish. If you've seen the 2005 film of Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley, have you seen that? Okay, the exterior shots when she and her family go shopping are in Stamford in Lincolnshire, and I have a church in that town. In fact, some of my parish features in the film. So that's the town centre parish, and I also run a retreat house as well. And in those contexts, there's not a huge opportunity for ecumenism. Certainly in the small villages where I serve, often the Church of England now is the only ecclesial presence there in those villages. In the town centre, it's rather different, and the retreat house is, again, a different context. So just in terms of unity, in the town centre, there are 4 Anglican churches, each only within about a quarter of a mile of each other. So you can almost see each other. So four churches all together, but of very different traditions and outlooks. So in terms of unity, we practice unity in diversity, in that we each offer a different perspective, but seek to express our common found faith. In terms of the parishes where the Church of England is the only presence there, we seek to practice unity in clarity, because we are the only representation of Christianity in those places. So we seek also in our teaching and our witness to try and represent a breadth of expression, or acknowledge that there are a diversity of expressions and views. And then with the retreat house, we try and practice unity in terms of accommodation, because we create a space where various different Christian individuals and groups can then occupy and sort of find a home and express themselves. So that's me, and that's my context.
Good afternoon, I'm Paul Noble. I was an active parish priest in the Diocese of Lincoln, but last year I retired, and my wife and I made a conscious decision to retire so that we could be close to Walsingham, where Bishop Norman was the parish priest, which means that nearly every Sunday I am involved in the worship of the church in the parish of Walsingham, with all of its ecumenical dimensions there, and as well assisting every now and again in the shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham as well. My ecumenical links began soon after my ordination, when I was in a diocese in the west of England. Bishop Norman said in his talk he believed that ecumenism and Christian unity would or could not take place until we'd solved the whole position and understanding of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And one of the things that I was instrumental in that part of England was to form an active branch of, in England it was called the Ecumenical Society of the Blessed Virgin Mary, founded by, it was a Catholic layman who was told if he wanted to work for unity, he should work with that figure which most divided Christianity. And so for a considerable time, that worked with Methodists and other Reformed, Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Anglicans in meeting together for worship which represented our own individual integrity, but with also an ecumenical office and lots of various study papers on the Blessed Virgin Mary in all sorts of different contexts.
Would you give a short presentation of yours, of the other panelists, because there are also some new people to us?
I'm Norman Banks, and till 18 months ago I was the Bishop of Richborough, who is a suffragan of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Metropolitan of England, and my particular brief was to care for those parishes that were theologically conservative. And when I first started, I had both the conservative Catholic parishes and the very conservative evangelical parishes. So my robes cupboard had a list, 2 lists. One said, Catholic parish, take mitre, crozier, and chasuble. And then underneath it said, evangelical parish, take floppy Bible, take shepherd's crook, and take choir dress. So I was an ecumenical instrument within the Church of England, and I went out from everything from singing in Latin to giving my personal testimony, all in the course of a week. So that was a very interesting experience. Father Paul and Father Ed were colleagues with me, and we worked very closely together while I was Bishop of Richborough. And to say that ecumenical credentials, ecumenism began with me from my first year at university in Oxford, and has continued right throughout my ministry, with extraordinary, privileged, wonderful experiences, ranging from being one of the clergy at Pope St. John Paul II's 80th birthday to all kinds of extraordinary places and situations that I've been over those years. But one of the things I valued most when I was the vicar of Walsingham, that place, the Methodist church or chapel there, which the present building had been built after John Wesley had preached in Walsingham. They had a service on a Sunday afternoon, so of course, in the morning I was doing services as vicar with a great deal of ritual, but if they couldn't have a minister on a Sunday afternoon in the village, then I used to take the Methodist service, and felt a great privilege to be in that place where John Wesley had preached. And I think of all the things that I've done, ecumenically, on a high level and a low level, the little Methodist community in Walsingham asked me to go to another Methodist church to talk to them, and their superintendent introduced me and says, "We have brought our vicar." And that meant more to me than anything else, that the Methodist community saw me as their vicar. So I could talk to you for hours, but we leave it at that.
So I'm Brother Pierre-André. I'm the Dominican Superior for the Brothers here in Sweden. My ecumenical journey actually started in England when I was working and living there before I thought about priesthood and joining the order. And I'm a cradle Catholic. I grew up in the Catholic Church, very pious and active family. But when I was living in England, I felt like a foreigner within the Catholic Church because I was French, and most of the Catholics where I was living in Coventry were from descendants of Irish, having a grudge against England. So I started to shop around, and I ended it in a Baptist parish. And there was a fantastic pastor. I think this is the most beautiful and deep sermons I heard in my life. And Grandmeadow Overton was the pastor, became my spiritual director. And we started to talk, and we had many disagreements. And he gave me the letter to the Duke of Norfolk of John Henry Newman. And when I read that, I both fell in love with my own tradition, which I was part, but I started to see, but what should we do to come closer to one another? And I decided to go back to France to start to become a priest. When I joined the Dominican order, my province is it's engaged in the ecumenism since the beginning, because one of our biggest brother, Yves Congar, was a major figure for ecumenism during the Second Vatican Council. So for us, it's a part of our Dominican vocation to work for ecumenism. When I did my studies, I studied ecclesiology and especially the dialogue between the Anglican Communion and the Catholic Church. I did my master in Switzerland, and because I thought, I can study in the Catholic University in Fribourg, but that's boring. So I will go to Geneva and study with Protestants. So I did a seminar on how Luther became the reformer, And when I finished my master and was ordained deacon, my provincial came to me and said, do you have any objections to go to Sweden? I say, okay, no, I don't have any objections. I don't know Sweden, but it's okay, so you're going to Sweden. So I was sent 2016 in Lund, and I was so glad the Pope came to welcome me when I came in September 2016. And my ecumenical journey here started with Ingrid, because I received a mission from the diocese was to organize confirmation camp for young Catholic. And I had no idea how should I do that. And I saw that Svenska kyrkan, you are very good to organize confirmation camps. So I went to see her and say, hey, my name is Pierre-André. I know you organize with ecumenia. I love to just, and this is how I met lots of people. And then the bishop said to me, do you want to be the head for the Diocesan Commission for Ecumenism? So here I am.
So my name is Ingrid Nora Nielsen. I am also in Lund, where I serve as a student chaplain, and I'm also seconded to the Faith and Order Commission of the World Council of Churches, where I work in the Secretariat. My ecumenical journey, it actually began when I was a young student. I came to the community of Thésée in France, and there I found something that I hadn't met anywhere else, and that I realized that I was longing for and have been longing for all the time. I grew up here in the Church of Sweden. I was a chorister, and I really loved it all. But there I could finally live my faith 24/7. And in a wonderful liturgy that I also couldn't find here, of course, because it was ecumenical. It was based on Catholic and Orthodox, but also Reformed tradition, everything as a whole. So I spent 1 year there, and I enjoyed it very much and made deep friendships with a lot of people there, as you do when you were like 24 or whatever. But I think I grew some kind of, what I think a lot of us did by then. We thought that ecumenism was like, that's how to be church, that's how you're Christian. You just hang around one another and everything is open, everything is possible. And then I came back to Sweden, and of course everything wasn't really possible, I realized, when I started doing theology. But I continued, and I did my first master's actually in missiology. I went to Costa Rica and studied the Pentecostal movement there. And then I came back, I became ordained, and when I was a curate, first I was sent to the very north of this diocese, but then they told me, hey, would you like to do something special? Would you like to spend some months in your curacy in Wales? And I said, yes, that sounds very nice. And it became one of the most precious, I think, months actually of my service as a priest. I've served for 14 years now, but yet those memories are still with me, because I learned so much from the Anglican tradition. I was in a very open parish, but it was also very ecumenical. I remember I had 3 colleagues. One, she was throughout evangelical in one way, very low church. I think she made the kids take down the walls of Jericho during a service. And another one, so then we had a rector, and he was really in the middle, and that was perfect because he could do with everyone. And then I had a high church colleague who kind of brought a lot of nice elements into the liturgy, of which some I really appreciated and some I didn't really understand why I put there. But it was so beautiful to see all these 3 just serving together in the Church of Christ. Then I served in Sigtuna, and then I came to Lund, actually almost at the same time as you. I came in the spring of 2017, just after the Pope had visited, as we heard earlier today, after the ecumenical commemoration. And there I really found myself in an environment where friendship was growing in between the Lutheran parish and the Roman Catholics. And it was lovely to get into that environment, and we started to do podcasts together. We've been doing a podcast called Come and See. And we did Bible studies together. We organized an ecumenical day for our parishes after the pandemic and so on. But I just wanted to get even more into it. So some 2 years ago, I took a year off, because I heard that in the Anglican tradition, you have this very nice thing that after you've served for 10 years, you have the right to take a year off to study or do things.
3 months.
3 months, okay. Well, you need to exaggerate things sometimes to get things done, you know. Well, at least so I got a year's leave, and I went to Switzerland. I went to Bossé and to the World Council of Churches, and then I did a second master, advanced master in ecumenism, where I focused on how churches in the Porvo communion could be said through that they, through liturgy, actually can serve creation. Eucharistic liturgy, to be more precise. So, and I must say that for me, just this was too long, wasn't it? Anyhow, out of my point of view, I think that ecumenism is not just something that we do, of course, because we're trying to be faithful to Christ, because that's what he actually asks of us all the time, to try to be open to others and really to live in conversion all the time. But I also find it this vital aspect of the incarnation that we really do live when we try to do it together. And I think that's a very important aspect, and that's just how we can serve and how we can see God. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for your testimonies, as we say in our tradition. But what you all express in one way or the other is that we cannot be Christians without the other, without the entire body of Christ. And that makes me, to bridge it to next question, often when we pray, not least in this church where I worshiped as a student, I often pray with the word, we pray for the visible unity of all Christians. We pray for the unity of all Christians. And I just want to ask you, what do you think is meant by the term visible unity? And I also would like to ask, some people says that to talk about visible unity is out of fashion. Is that true? And if that's true, is that good?
So, for the Catholic Church, and I think for me as well, it's not just a concept which will end at the end of time, with parousia when Christ returns. It's something we have to actively work for. And for me, Christian unity, it's here. So the day I long for is when I can stand with my brothers and we can celebrate the Eucharist, as we did this morning, together. And this is what I want, I work for. This is what I do, ecumenism. And this is what the Catholic Church means by visible unity. Is not when Pope Leo reminded the ecumenical delegation that he was working for visible Christian unity, is not just a concept. No, it's physical. How it's going to look like, I don't know, because it's something we're going to discover together, working together. And I think there's a new stream of ecumenism, medwandering ecumenic, companionship ecumenic, where we rediscover our discipleship together. We are disciples, called to walk together and follow Christ. And when you read the document, the Bishop of Rome, you see this is a start of how can we understand the Pope's mission in the church, in the one church. Listening to how can you help me to understand my mission, not just, okay, visible unity is going to, actually you're coming back home, was the way we did ecumenism, I would say in the beginning or before the Second Vatican Council, is that actually are we going to deepen our understanding what being the church means. But we have to do it, and it takes time. Of course, it takes lots of frustration. But if we are not frustrated with ecumenism, it means we're not doing ecumenism.
So one could say that visible unity has to do that we who are joined together in the one baptism are able to celebrate the Eucharist together, recognizing the ministry of our respective churches and finding forms to exercise authority within the church that is not limited to our own contexts.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any comments on this?
I agree with everything you say, but if you get a group of Anglicans together from the whole range of expressions of Anglicanism, you will not get wholehearted agreement with what you've just said. And when I became Bishop of Richborough, and at first I had to look after the conservative evangelicals, actually Father Paul and Father Ed joined me because I felt I needed to have some discussions with the extreme conservative evangelicals in the Church of England. And it was quite clear that they weren't passive about visible unity, but they were antipathetic to Christian unity. And they were very honest. And I won't go into some of the things they said, but they basically found Catholic doctrines to be anathema. And there is still within Anglicanism a Puritan streak going back to the 16th century, which is very much alive. And some of the bigger evangelical churches that are growing are actually part of that movement. So I would say that one part of the Anglican Church would be saying yes, yes, yes to what you said, and another part of the Anglican Church would be saying no, no, no. And that makes it very difficult for a communion to make organic progress in the future, because in a sense, I don't know about the Church of Sweden, but the Church of England has got to sort out some of its own problems before it can actually be in realistic, dynamic dialogue with other churches.
When it comes to sorting out your own, I would say, presuppositions, I think that the Church of Sweden, we do have some work to do too. Right now we have, I think when it comes to the ecclesial identity of the Church of Sweden, there is still the word that this is a democratic folkkyrka, people's church and so on. But what does that mean when you're a church in minority? What does that mean when you suddenly live in a context which is multi-confessional, multi-religious? Sweden is one of the most, I read now that Sweden is one of the most diverse countries in Europe. Over 20% of the population are born outside of Sweden and come with their traditions, with their religions. What does that mean? What does that do to our ecclesial identity that for so long was connected to the culture? Although I think it's a very good thing, and I think it's a very good debate. But and if I would make some sort of reply from our side, if we in the Lutheran Church, I mean, Christology is extremely important, and there you have the Word became flesh. The Word was made flesh. So I would say that to work for visible unity, for it to become something real and concrete, tangible, that's something that has to do with incarnation and the importance of it, for it to be real and for us then to follow and then maybe to succeed in or not succeed in. But I would also make a comment maybe from the side of the World Council of Churches a bit, because when it comes to these problems with the non-confessional churches, so to speak, we also have a global Christian forum that is formed especially with those churches who do not want to take part in the ecumenical ordinary dialogues because they think that is too strict, is not following the way of viewing what is a church and how do we act and how can we resolve things. And it's more of a forum where you meet and you discuss your path in faith, more or less, I would say.
Thank you.
Just to echo one thing from Bishop Norman before I go on to my other thing. On Wednesday, I celebrated Mass in one of the small chapels in Walsingham, and there were two men there who, when they came out, they said, "Why are our churches divided? Why are our churches divided? What you did there, that was so wonderful. We recognise it. It's exactly," and it was exactly the same because it was basically a Roman Catholic Mass from the president. And I said, "But you have got to realise there will be those in my church who would be horrified, shocked, and furious at that service that I had taken." But to go back to visible unity, I agree that visible unity is something that we absolutely have to strive for with the end in mind that you're talking. But my background is as a historian, and my concern is that we should always look for the unity of Christians, the unity of the church, for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons. By the wrong reasons, I mean expediency. The Orthodox are mentioned this morning because the Orthodox and the Western Church were united in 1439, Council of Constance. But it wasn't a genuine desire for unity. It was only because the Orthodox thought they were going to be completely defeated by the Turks, which in the end they were. But they didn't enter into that visible unity for the right reasons in Christ. They were worldly reasons. And in our country, and I think speaking yesterday at Sweden, there have been denominations that have been bitterly have come together really because they recognised they couldn't do anything anymore on their own, and they wanted to raise money by selling buildings. 1932, 3 big Methodists organisations all came together, and one of those had come together from 3 other ones 25 years earlier. And it was trumpeted as this visible unity is going to really mean the Methodist Church in the United Kingdom will take off, we will convert the country, our denomination will thrive because we're no longer divided. And there are precious few Methodists and active Methodist chapels left in England anymore. Within under 100 years, what was hailed as a wonderful action in visible unity has not shown any real progress, because it was entered into not because they really wanted unity, but because they thought it was the best thing to do in the circumstances. And that's been a pattern with other churches that have come together as well. The unity hasn't been in Christ, and for a desire to follow those commands and injunctions of Christ with a real vision, but just for expedient and sometimes even worldly motives.
I think the quest for visible unity also has to have the mission imperative at its heart, because Christ's prayer for our unity was that the world might believe and that we would authentically represent the unity within the Godhead. And I think we have to acknowledge that our mission potential is hindered by our disunity, and there has to be a dissatisfaction with that, because if we're not careful, we can become very domestically comfortable with disunity, because ecumenism allows us to do an awful lot together, and that is really good and that is great, but we can't be in a sense content with that, because all the while we are failing to, as I say, to authentically represent Christ to the world. And that the world's need is needs to be, I think, at the forefront. Otherwise, we risk being distracted by our own desire for a sort of a unity of contentment.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I think it's very important to be hopeful. I can tell you about something which was, I would say, I never thought it would happen. So when I moved to Sweden, I was just a deacon. And then I was called to ordination 2017, and I went back to France for my ordination to be ordained with my brothers. And I sent an invitation to the Bishop of Lund, just saying, I've been here 8 months now in Lund. We have this new connection between the Roman Catholic parish and the Lutheran Church. I just sent an invitation. And I received a very beautiful letters from Bishop Johann. Say, I cannot come to your ordination, but I will send a representative from Lund to your ordination. So for my ordination, I had the domkyrkokaplan, Lena Sjöstrand, who represented the Bishop of Lund. I had a representative, because I was very connected as well to the Church of England, from the Diocese of Europe. So we have 2 priests, not Catholics, who were part. And they're not just spectators, like guests. When we did the procession, the entrance procession, they were in full vestment, priestly vestment, with the priests during ordination. When I came back in Lund after my ordination, I celebrated my first Mass in our parish, and it's something which is very big, the first Mass of a newly ordained priest. And the Bishop of Lund with his wife was as my first Mass in our parish, and when people started to queue to receive the blessing, the Bishop of Lund was there to be blessed of me. Mm-hmm. So maybe we're not yet there yet, but I see already signs of, this visible unity in March. Is there lots of differences? Absolutely. Last year, when Ingrid preached in my priory for time of creation, I was reported to my bishop by one of our fellow Catholics. So it's not just within the Church of England that you have like these streams. I've got as well lots of internal opposition within the Catholic Church. But we still go, we move forward.
I think at this, when we have talked about visible unity, what has been, to summarize it, that it seems that this panel are in agreement that visible unity is something important, also knowing that that is not the understanding of all Christians, and that's a challenge. I thought of challenging you by saying something and formulate myself in a way that I hope you will disagree. Some people who know me knows that I like to do things like that. And if I should, we have Anglicans, we have a Roman Catholic, and the Church of Sweden priest here. And what to say to upset them all? Well, sometimes it seems as if the Roman Catholic Church, even after the Second Vatican Council, still somehow believes they are the one true church. The Church of Sweden, on the other hand, not least in its decision-making, behaves as if it was the one true Catholic Church, having no reason to consult anyone else but their politically elected members. And the Anglican Church have actually realized they are just a part of the Catholic Church and not it in itself. Is there someone who wants to disagree with me?
No.
So the Anglicans are okay.
Me too.
I didn't manage to upset anyone.
Now I'm going to send something very heretical and everyone's going to see it. So maybe tomorrow I don't have my mission as a head of the ecumenical commission. Are we the one true church? Often, when I was studying theology for my priesthood formation, our teacher says, in the Catholic Church, you have to be French. Because the answers, you know, when you have the menu and you choose in the restaurant if you want cheese or dessert, the right answer is always both. I want cheese and dessert. And it's true when you read our documents, and we have many interpretation what it means, this substitute in that we have in our core document about the church, that Christ resides fully in the Catholic Church. Yes, it's true. But it's also true that we cannot just say Christ cannot go outside the limit of the Roman Catholic Church. And this is the articulation, in theology, the articulation "and" is the most important theological word. Because it would be not true if I say, actually Christ is everywhere, and is, no. Or if I would say, it's just here. I have to articulate both "and." So yes, we have to, and that's the challenge. The problem often, and I think that's the tragedy of our time, we want simple answer on hard questions. And simplistic, I would say simplistic answers on hard questions. And we don't want to do the hard work of theology and to say, how do we articulate this both and?
I think what you are referring to is I think it's in the Lumen Gentium. From it is a sentence saying, the Church of Christ subsists in the Catholic Church. And I know that it was some debate. Some wanted it to said, the Church of Christ is the Catholic Church, but this subsisted means in one way it is, but it has an openness, and it's of course debated how it should be interpreted.
There was a document from Pope, so Dominus Jesus, some was, I would say, because we always look at the positive documents on ecumenism, but this one is very hard, because then we started to reuse the term ecclesiological communities and churches. And we only use the word churches for the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, and all the rest are ecclesiological communities. And I know I was in England when this document was published, and the outcry who came, because it was this question of how do you interpret substitute in. But what is very interesting, it forces actually our dialogue to recognize, okay, what are the signs of Catholicity in our churches? And what are and then we had very deep talks about the need of episcopacy. What is episcopate, and is it just a superintendent who's overlooking things, or there's something which is a very it's ordination, so something what is the apostolic, what do we mean by apostolic succession? And you have lots of new ways of looking at it, so I think it forces us sometimes but it's hard.
There's a way in which the churches that are not Roman Catholic Church are naughty children. Because, the Reformation, the Protestants are protesting against Rome. That's where the term comes from. So there is a point from the 16th century where identity was a negative identity. So identity was about not being Roman Catholic. And even though the Church of England kept episcopacy, it interpreted in a different way. That's the negative side. The positive side is, by being naughty children, you still know that you have loving parents. So you can almost see that the Protestant churches are kind of adolescents. So the mother church, which I would say has the corpus of truth within the magisterium, but that corpus of truth is not dead, it's living, so then it can change. Adolescent children can actually change the opinions of their parents. And there's a way in which, historically, I think that there has been a freedom within the protesting churches to explore things in a way that the Catholic Church has been constrained to explore. And I think that's realizing itself at the moment. The way that's outplaying itself at the moment is that the Reformed churches are being far more experimental in the areas of sexuality and gender, in a way that the Catholic Church is constrained by its doctrine. So I think that is an interesting example. Whereas you might say that the Church of England and Church of Sweden are quite adolescent in terms of how they're exploring something like sexuality and gender. But it's interesting how the parents is looking on very positively at what we're doing, because they want to learn from it in a way that they can't do within themselves because of the way in which the structures and the mindset works. So there's the way in which I think that where God is in all of this, which is what we're all about in the end, where is God in all of this? Where God is in all of this is that within the Anglican Church and perhaps in the Church of Sweden, where there is much more freedom, which of course negatively means that everyone has their own opinion, but positively means within that more open discussion, truths can be revealed because of that openness that will positively, ultimately affect the mother church, which is the Catholic Church. So I would come down to say that as an Anglo-Catholic, I do believe that the mother church, the church that contains the deposit of faith, is the Roman Catholic Church. I have no doubt about that. But I'm grateful that I've been born and brought up in a Reformed church, in a way, because that has given me an opportunity to explore. And quite often, some of my Roman Catholic friends, off the record, want to explore in a way that they can't explore on the record. So again, I think you can turn it all around positively to say God is working in our different denominations in helping us discern divine truths. And I think the truth comes as each church experiences a kind of ecclesial humility, because in that humility is the process. And of course, humility comes from humus, which is earth. So therefore, it's when we're discussing these earthy issues like sexuality and gender from different perspectives that the truth will emerge. But I would say at the end of the day, the future will lie in somehow the Church of Rome being able to hold all of this together.
Thank you. I mean, that was quite impressive, an impressive perspective. I don't know if how many of you are here tomorrow, because tomorrow there will be another conference day in the afternoon by the Förbundet för kristen enhet, the Union for Christian Unity, and who celebrates its 60th anniversary. And it has been, in the Church of Sweden, people who accepts the Catholic faith and also accepts the primacy of the Bishop of Rome and believes in a possible return to the Mother Church, but still believing that our confession, the Augsburg Confession, could be interpreted in a way that is not in itself in opposition to the Catholic faith. And I think that's... So I recommend everyone who don't know what they should do tomorrow afternoon to come to this conference. But talking about this in the Church of Sweden, that wouldn't be an alien perspective from an Anglo-Catholic.
It was just interesting. You used that word return to the Mother Church.
My English is not so nuanced.
It was excellent because it chimed with one of the things I looked up from Bishop Norman's going through the Archbishops of Canterbury, meeting with the popes. And of course, before Michael Ramsey, there was a really crusty, old-fashioned Archbishop of Canterbury who was the first to visit Rome. Geoffrey Fisher was 1950. Anyway, Pope John the 23rd. John the 23rd was Pope at the time. It was very low key because it was the first time it had happened. And Pope John the 23rd spoke about the Church of England returning. And Geoffrey Fisher said, return means going back. And you can't go back. All we can do is go forward. But surely what we must do is to go forward so that we can trust that a time will come when we will converge. And apparently, John the 23rd said, you are right. So I've just taken up your return.
Thank you.
I need to say something so that people think that the Church of Sweden is self-sufficient in any way. But I thought it was interesting to point out what you actually mentioned about Confessio Augustana in the article about the church. You all might be familiar with it. That is very short. It's a short paragraph, a very short paragraph. It says that the church is where the word of God is rent och klart förkunnat, where it's clearly preached and the sacraments are kept and given to people. And you can say that that's a way of restricting what is a church. But if I understood it correctly, it's more the other opposite, that is really trying to proclaim an openness in the church, an openness for different views, ecclesiological views, so to keep unity in this church and among churches, and to open for unity with other churches too. Because, and I think that's a very important notion, and I think the Church of Sweden, during the last centuries, I did actually agree with you. I think we become a bit self-sufficient. But it's not really, is it a fault of the church, or is it actually the system that the church has been put under after the separation from the state? And that is something very important I think, to talk about, because it also means that we have secular ideologies that do interfere with theological decision making and also ultimately our ecumenical relations. And when it comes to going back to the church, I think what you said was very good about that coming forward instead, because that's we are called, we live in this time here and now. There's always a kairos moment in the moment that we live, an invitation from Christ. And the full church will be, I hope, for unification with you, but also with the Orthodox, because that's really the fullness of the church. It's not just Western Christianity, it's all Christianity. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to be a bit bold in that, in this daring project. So I think that was it.
I thought I would like to ask some question to our Anglican friends, and it has to do with what's called the Anglican comprehensiveness, the holding together of many things in one church. Last Sunday, I went to 2 services when I was in Oxford. First, High Mass in Pusey House with bells and smells and singing in Latin and the Angelus at the end, and very nice. But in the evening, I went to St. Aldate's. It was worship song, lots of people, very inviting, and not very few things that could remind you that they belong to a church that we would recognize as a liturgical church, the Church of England. But somehow it fascinated me that it's able to be held together. And also what the Church of England has managed is also over these controversial issue on ordination of women and being able to hold together different views within the one and the same church. And what I wonder is, might the Church of England be an ecumenical model for a reunited church?
Well, it's only because the Church of England believes in the doctrine of reception, and reception is open-ended. Now, reception does not mean getting used to. Reception means testing until the mind of God is realized and understood. And I think that is, as I think I said in my talk this morning, that is probably the gift that we are giving to the rest of the church at the moment. So, the Church of Sweden made definite decisions and then basically said, unless you believe that, then you are in the wrong. But those decisions, as Mother Ingrid has said, were politically biased because politics came into the equation. And although the Church of England has still got, as I said this morning, Erastian tendencies, the theology has been separated from the state. And so it decided, the Church of England decided, it would give itself space. And I think that is something to offer to the wider church. And I think the next one is going to be, and I mentioned before, the next one is certainly going to be over sexuality and actually more importantly, gender. Because that is going to be the big debate across the whole of the Western Christian world about how we deal with gender. And maybe what the Church of England can offer in that debate is space. Because as we begin to try to deal with people whose understandings of themselves as outside what we see as normative, as we learn to understand all of that, is to be in a period of reception. So as not saying yes or no to these things. And so I would say that, that comprehensiveness viewed positively and living with differences creatively only works and can work if each side gives the other side space. Mm-hmm. And I think, in our present society where everything is moving so quickly and people are wanting immediate decisions about everything, that everything's got to be decided and then cut and dried, that is totally antipathetic to the Christian experience. Mm-hmm. And it might take 1,000 years in God's time rather than our time to come to the ultimate decision. And we've got to relearn about God's time rather than our time. And this reception period in the Church of England, I think, is just a little glimpse of that theological sort of gift or prism through which we can actually see how we live our lives as Christians, one with another.
I think one of the dangers of comprehension is that it's often seen as the desire for unity's sake, to tolerate a vast diversity of views. I'm not saying there's nothing credible about that, but I think for Anglican comprehensiveness to truly be Anglican comprehensiveness, it's a variety of emphasis from a common held deposit of faith. And if there's a different emphasis, whether it's worship and sharing in the richness of the word, or a Pusey House with the emphasis on the dignified celebration of the sacrament, if it's shades of emphasis, then that is comprehensive, and ultimately it has a legitimacy. But to say if it's solely the pursuit of, say, an idea or ideal of unity, which ultimately has an elasticity which renders it almost inauthentic, then I don't think it has anything to offer in that way.
You said in a way what I was going to, some of what I was going to say anyway, is that just as that's the positive side of what the Church of England could offer, it has to be said that the Church of England is criticised for being so many different things, and as you were saying, Father, the desire of a lot of the younger people now for truth and authenticity, to be part of a church which speaks with so many different heads, is perceived within a large part of the country as a negative thing. I don't know whether it's the same in Sweden, that there are people saying, the Church of Sweden will cope with anything, and we want to know what really the Christian faith is about. So I don't think it's solely the Church of England that's offering this model, and it has drawbacks as well as things to offer.
Thank you for your answer. It was a very good answer. I would like to ask the panelists, and after that I will also invite all of you, if you so wish. If you have a question to someone who has been speaking today, or to the group of us, but have you any questions to ask to another speaker today?
I'm thinking of the evangelicals in USA and Trump and all that. These influences come via internet, also into our country. You meet them in discussions with people that inform themselves via internet, and not so much by newspapers and so on. Have you any comments on that? And then I thought the term Catholic. The Greeks today use Katholikos as a common term meaning for all. So I think the meaning of that word would be an opener rather than a closer.
Thank you. That is two questions. One first about evangelicalism in the United States. Is it someone who have a commentary?
It's true what you're saying, that most of the young men who knock on our doors and come to our chaplaincy in Lund, the first, I would say, the way they knew about, they meet the church is through internet. One of the two biggest Catholic influencers in the world are two Americans. One is a bishop, Bishop Robert Barron, and the other is Father Mike Schmidt, who is as well a podcast and an emission. And it's true that their contact with the Catholic Church is actually very American. And it's not something I don't like to say it's good or it's bad, or it's more like culture plays a role. And you use the word contextual. The thing is, with the development, and there's something I see, I love Pope Francis, but there was one thing I found a bit difficult with his papacy, is suddenly we had a super bishop. And every morning, if you would have the sermon of Pope Francis. And in a way, he put all our bishops on the side, which he doesn't, like our ecclesiology, our church, are built on our bishops. And the Catholic Church is not just one bishop and some, subsidiaries who are in the world, but they are all the bishops together in communion with the Bishop of Rome. This is our the ecclesiology. And suddenly I have young men, especially students, who came to me and said, yeah, but this priest in the USA said that. Or, this bishop thinks that. I said, yeah, but my bishop is in Stockholm. I mean, I'm not saying he's wrong, but I belong to the Catholic Church here in Sweden. So this is who my bishop is. And of course, it's very important to be, so it's often how I meet that and say, okay, but what is the more, I would say, engagement with society in the USA, and what is more European or more Swedish or French? But it's a challenge because we see this globalization as well within the church. And it doesn't respect the local expression of the Catholic faith. And I think for us, especially ministers in our churches, is to actually be good formators on that, to talk about what the church is, and as well in its institution. And sometimes, we tend to look at unity as uniformity, but it's a wrong way of doing unity.
Yeah, well, it seems that it's not a very Catholic thing to say there is the one Catholic answer to a question, because and I think it's what you say is that you broaden the term Catholicity, just being that one Catholic, because Catholicity holds many things within itself. And I guess that when we, call ourselves Catholic Christians, that is also a way of broadening the term Catholic, isn't it?
You would say something?
Yeah.
So can I say something first? Yeah. No, speaking about the term Catholic, I was thinking while we were continuing this discussion now, for the Church of Sweden, is it evangelical, Lutheran, evangelical, Catholic? And I just leave that question open. But I think the Groupe de Dom, they made a very interesting study that was released 2 years ago on Catholicity. And I don't know how familiar you are with the Groupe de Dom, but it's a group in Central Europe composed of Catholic and Reformed theologians. And they spent a lot of work working on the concept of Catholicity, because in our confession we usually say one holy, and in Reformed tradition sometimes you say universal church instead of Catholic, because you just like to make a demarcation like we're not Roman Catholic. And what the conclusion they came to into that study was that no, we should not do this. We should. The important thing now for the unity of the church to make space and room for it even more is actually to go back to use the word Catholic, the term Catholic. And that was the study comprises of course a lot more, but just into this discussion right now, I would say.
Your comment?
We are all Orthodox Catholic Christians. I never met a Christian who says, I want to be a heterodox Christian. Or I want to be an un-Catholic Christian, because ours were not the church. The church from the beginning was Catholic and Orthodox. It's and we have to make the difference, because some people I hear, when you say the creed, no, I'm not a Roman Catholic, so I cannot say the one Catholic. I believe in the one Catholic and Holy Church. But Catholic means universal. So, and we have to use the words. Because I want to call myself as well an Orthodox Christian.
Do you have a comment?
Back to Nicaea, aren't we?
Yeah. From Sengdahl.
Thank you, dear panel. It's actually an excellent panel. I'm very grateful for each and every one of you. I want to pose two questions to our Anglican friends, Bishop and the two priests of you. First of all, John Henry Newman converted in 1845. The aftermath of this decision somehow is still with the Anglican Church. And you, if anyone, would be the ones to address that somehow, to tell us what's going on. Is it still, I mean, you all know what I mean. The drift towards Rome within your, well, is with us as well. And if at all, how do you deal with that? Secondly, it's a more down-to-earth question. I wanted to know a little bit about the community of the resurrection in Murfield. As you also know, of course, that they did an excellent job in South Africa for about a century, then they withdrew, sadly enough. Just a little word on that, please.
Hans has been a missionary in South Africa, and he's a friend of Murfield as well.
I'll do the first one, because when Archbishop Rowan Williams twisted my arm to become Bishop of Richborough, which I didn't want to do, because I didn't want a job with a negative view. So I didn't want a job as Bishop of Richborough, which people saw as being against something, because I've never been against anything. So that was really hard to say yes to represent the traditional continuum within the Church of England. But he, one, said, could I do it? And then the second thing he said, that my job was to stem the drift towards Roman Catholicism amongst the clergy at that time and the laity, and that was as a result of the ordinariate, which I have to say, hand on heart, I think was a mistake, because with Rome in its generosity, offering patrimony to Anglicans and to Anglo-Catholic priests the opportunity to be Catholic priests and be married, which has caused a lot of trouble within the Catholic Church amongst those clergy who feel that it's unfair that those Anglican clergy have been given that privilege which they've not got. But in that period of the founding of the Ordinariate, there was quite a number of priests and laity, not as many as Rome had been told would go, and what was left in the Catholic wing of the Church of England, the traditional continuum, as I call it, was actually a sense of panic and despair and a feeling of abandonment, particularly when the three bishops, as a group, deliberately used the word of submitting to Rome. They actually used that term. And so it was into that void that Rowan Williams said, could I do the job? And my job was to try to help the Catholic wing of the church to recalibrate itself in a way post the Ordinariate. And in those first months, and Paul and Ed were fantastic supporters of me when I started the job. In those first months, I could have wept as I went around, particularly talking to those clergy who were completely torn because they wanted to stay Anglican, but then this door had been opened for them to become Roman Catholics. What were they going to do? There was this terrible, and one or two clergy had were near to nervous breakdown because that internal pull within themselves. Here was the opportunity that Rome was was beckoning, but they wanted to stay loyal Anglicans. They wanted to stay within the church of their birth, and so that was my job. And I think we managed, didn't we? I mean, we did a lot of work on this. We managed to quieten things down, and to see that, you know, that it was harking back, as I said this morning, to that conversation I had with Cardinal Ratzinger, who was saying to me, for goodness sake, stay, because ecumenism can only happen if there are Anglicans who understand the Reformed and the Catholic point of view, and then getting those clergy and laity to say, please, for goodness sake, stay, because you're necessary for the good health, not just of the Church of England, but for the good health of the whole church within the country. So that would be my answer to you. And I think things have settled, and there has been a renewed sense. And then, of course, we had the next crisis over the consecration of women, whatever. But we continue to be there, because the landscape of any church is hugely impoverished if a large number of that church move to a different communion or a different denomination. And I don't think that's what actually Benedict wanted. He didn't want that at all, but that's what actually happened. So you ask a very pertinent question, and a question that which was actually my job for 13 years to deal with. But throughout all of that process, I did really feel a great sense of the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and that I was being given the words that I needed to use and to say to those tortured Anglicans about the importance of staying within their own communion.
Yeah, and I've had similar things said to me as well. But,
So you mentioned about the community of the resurrection at Mirfield. Well, I was there 25 years ago, so I don't suppose much has changed. While I was there, the community withdrew fully from South Africa, which was a great sadness. I used to talk with Father Aelred Stubbs, and obviously Father Nicholas Stebbing is still a member of the community. And so that legacy is one that continues to bear fruit in South Africa. And of course, Desmond Tutu was a regular visitor to the community. But in terms of its size, it couldn't maintain that mission and ministry. And I think it was Crispin Harrison, when he was the superior, who made that difficult decision. And the community was somewhat diminished, but now there are new novices, and certainly a new confidence within the community. Whether they will look to expand their work, or maybe in a sense they are perhaps on a more contemplative trajectory now, rather than sort of active mission and service beyond the mother house now. But they continue to try and honor that legacy, and it's very good. You can pray with the community online. They're very open and accessible now. So it's I would say get in touch with them, pop and see them, talk to them about that legacy, because there'll be brothers there who want to remember and express and share the joy of those years.
Hans is writing a book on Desmond Tutu. For one question more, yeah.
I watched a great movie recently called Silence, where two missionaries were talking to each other about the locals in that country who had converted to Christianity. And one of the missionaries said that they are exemplary Christians in their strong faith. But the other missionary then said that no, their understanding of our faith is so different that we can't even call them Christians. So they had completely different views on what even is a Christian. And I think that is a dilemma that has that Christians throughout history has struggled with. So I would like to hear your thoughts on that, like the problem of Christians who might not even identify each other as Christians. How do you navigate in that?
I'm not a Christian because someone else recognizes me as a Christian. I'm a Christian because I'm baptized in Jesus Christ. So my recognition as a Christian doesn't come from what someone could think of me. I remember once I went to in the beginning I went to the Pentecostal church in Lund, and I was not with my Dominican dress, but I was with my civil dress, clothes. And after the service, because I was new and they noticed I was new, someone came to me and said, "Oh, I have got a question for you. Are you saved?" And I look at the person and say, "I'm a Roman Catholic priest. You tell me." And the person didn't know how to answer the question back. And so, yes, I know sometimes we have, but it's very interesting. I made, like often when we pass this dilemma, okay, maybe you don't see me as Christian or you don't believe because I'm not born again, and especially this is what I meet when I deal with evangelicals, they have this strongly, then when you accept to listen to, okay, why do you think that, or what are you saying that, and then we can go deeper in our own understanding. So yeah, it's always a challenge. It's always a challenge. I remember the first time I sat a panel with the Swedish church, and the priest introduced himself as the Catholic Church in Sweden. And I said, okay, no, but I've got something to learn in why, and we became quite friends with one another. But it's true that in the beginning I was a bit surprised.
Thank you. I'm about to conclude because in 15 minutes we will sing Vespers together. And I think it's a beautiful thing to do as we wait and hope for the visible unity when we will celebrate the Eucharist together. Saying the office together is very much, I think, a step towards it, and we are saying the common prayer of the church together, and that's always a beautiful thing. And when we do Vespers, we always pray the Magnificat. We are using the words of Our Lady as she magnifies the Lord. And there is something that resonates with me, what has been said in many ways, that for the visible unity of Christians to come about, we must find something common ground about Our Lady. And could you just, each of you, if you have just a word, what is the role of Our Lady in the building up of the unity of Christ's Church?
Well, frankly, she's the mother of God, so then she's the mother of the church. And we are called to imitate her. And I think a recognition of that is something that you do not need to be neither Roman Catholic or Orthodox to recognize that. And I can just say, I think something very beautiful, actually, we're in the church where I serve right now, in the Cathedral of Lund. We have a chapel which is now more or less, the whole cathedral is dedicated to the Holy Mother of God once. And during Reformation time, there were a lot, before Reformation, we had a lot of statues and chapels inaugurated too. Most of these disappeared, but there was one statue that was kept, and her hand is cut off, as was mentioned earlier today. But she was in the crypt for a long time, but now she is taken up, and she is standing at one of the walls, and in front of her, people come and light candles, and it's really become a place of prayer in the cathedral. And just 2 years ago, we were given another statue of Mary from the Catholic parish as a sign of our friendship, as a sign of unity, and she's also there now. And so I think she has a very important role to play.
She's a model because she's the one who listened, and it's because she listened and said yes that Jesus Christ came into the world. So, and what's amazing when you read the Annunciation, it's both a yes, and the first thing she does is to go out and serve her cousin. So for me. And in Lumen Gentium, there was a debate in the Catholic Church. Should we have a separate document for the Virgin Mary? And the Church Fathers decided no. The document on the Virgin Mary is the document on the Church. And for us, we cannot dissociate Mary from the Church.
Our Lady is the one who shows us that when we hear the word of God, when we take it to heart and practice it, live it out in our lives, then we are the brothers and sisters of Christ. And along with Our Lady, we are the ones who bring Christ into a waiting world.
You almost quoted John Paul II's words when he was in England in 1982. They wanted to have a commemoration of Our Lady of Walsingham, but they knew they couldn't take the Pope to Walsingham because it was such a tiny place and the roads were so... they could never have coped with the hundreds of thousands who wanted to be. So they took the statue of the Virgin Mary to Wembley Stadium. And he said, we're not going to Walsingham, but Our Lady's coming to Wembley. But he said exactly the same. He said, Mary listened. But then he said, it's not the point, the part of Christians to imitate Mary in listening and prayer. They have to do exactly, it has to be active. And as Mary did and served, that's the other part of Christianity. And she's the exemplar for that.
I can see another day conference developing here on the role of Mary. I'd like to say two things. And that is, within the Reformed tradition, the emphasis has on the whole been on the cross rather than on the incarnation. For the balance of a healthy Christian experience and internal dialogue, we need incarnation and redemption in equal measures. And that Mary helps us constantly to recall that the Word became flesh and flesh was made good, rather than the sacrifice of Christ on the cross for our sins. And the two things need to come together. And then the very final thing I'd say is that Mary emphasizes what I call particularity, which is God chose to come at a particular time, in a particular moment, in a particular woman. And the arguments that you hear constantly, but if Jesus was born at a different time, he would have said different things. Then we can't go down that path. So the path that we take is a particularist path, which is we have the wonder of this moment of the conception and birth of Christ through the Virgin Mary, and we must spend our time in wonderment and exploring of that and its meaning, rather than saying, well, it might have happened at a different time in a different way. And she calls us back to that constantly.
Thank you all in the panel. And I believe that the word Christ says about Our Lady to St. John, he says to all us, his beloved disciples, that this is your mother. And that Mary is our mother, and that's true for all of us who are Christians, is also something that draws us to unity. And I think when we are singing very soon the Magnificat together, we could contemplate it. We are, as God is our Father and we are brothers and sisters, Mary is our mother. And we believe that she is the mother of Christ, she is the mother of the church, and she's also the mother of unity. May she pray for us. And thank you for today.